Chapter 18 of the Expedition of the Donner Party and its Tragic Fate. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Expedition of the Donner Party and its Tragic Fate by Eliza P. Donner Houghton. Chapter 18. Grandma, Happy Visits, A New Home, Am Persuaded to Leave It. We were still without Elitha when up the road and toward the fort came a stout little old woman in brown. On one arm she carried a basket, and from the hand of the other hung a small covered tin pail. Her apron was almost as long as her dress skirt, which reached below her ankles, yet was short enough to show brown stockings above her low shoes. Two ends of the bright kerchief which covered her neck and crossed her bosom were pinned on opposite sides at the waistline. A brown quilted hood of the same shade and material as her dress and apron concealed all but the white lace frill of a grandma cap, which fastened under her chin with a bow. Her dark hair, drawn down plain to each temple, was coiled there into tiny wheels, and a brass pin stuck through crosswise to hold each coil in place. Her bright, speaking eyes, more brown than gray, gave charm to a face which might have been pretty, had disease not marred it in youth. As she drew near, her wonderful eyes looked into our faces and won from our lips a timid, "Good morning, Grandma." That title, which we had been taught to use when speaking to the aged, was new and sweet to her, who had never been blessed with child. She set the basket on the ground, put the pail beside it, and caressed us in a cheery way, then let us peep in and see what she had brought especially for us. How did it happen? This is something we were to learn later. Such luxuries, eggs, bread, butter, cheese, and milk in the dear little tin pail. Seeing how thin and hungry we looked, she gave each a piece of buttered bread before going with us to our neighbor's house, where she left the food, with instructions, in broken English, that it was for us three little girls who had called her Grandma, and that we must not be given too much at a time. When next Grandma came, she took puny Georgia home with her, and left me hugging the promise that I also should have a visit if I would wait my turn patiently. Who can picture my delight when Georgia got back and told me of all she had seen? Cows, horses, pigs, and chickens, but most thrilling of all was about the cross old sheep, which would not let her pass if she did not carry a big stick in sight. Still, I should not have been so eager to go, nor so gleeful on the way, had I known that the good-bye kiss I gave my sister Frances at parting that day would be the last kiss in 5 long years. Grandma was as happy as I. She could understand English better than she could speak it, and in answering my questions, explained largely by signs. Courage, her gray poodle, left deep footprints in the dust as he trotted ahead over the well-known road, and I felt an increasing affection for him upon learning that he too had crossed the plains in an immigrant wagon, and had reached the fort at about the same time I had reached the snow. He was so small that I imagined he must have been a wee baby dog when he started, and that he was not yet half grown. My surprise and admiration quickened beyond expression when Grandma assured me that he could do many tricks, understood French and German, and was learning English. Then she laughed and explained that he was thus accomplished because she and Christian Brunner, her husband, and Jacob, her brother-in-law, had come from a place far away, across lands and big waters, where most of the people spoke both French and German, and that they had always talked to Courage in one or the other of these languages. As soon as we got into the house, she opened the back door and called, "Jacob!" Then turning, she took a small cup of rennet clabber from the shelf, poured a little cream over it, put a spoon in it, and set it on the table before me. While I was eating, a pleasant elderly man came in, and by nods, motions, and words, partly English and partly something else, convinced me that he liked little girls and was glad to see me. Then of a sudden he clasped his hands about my waist and tossed me in the air as father did before his hand was hurt, and when he wanted to startle me and then hear me laugh. This act, which brought back loving memories, made Jacob seem nearer to me, nearer still when he told me I must not call him anything but Jakey. Everything about the house was as Georgia had described. Even the big stick she had used to keep the old sheep from butting her over was behind the door where she had left it. When Christian Brunner got home from the fort, Grandma had supper nearly ready, and he and I were friends the instant we looked into each other's face, for he was the grandpa who had given us the liver the evening we did not find our sisters. He had gone home that night and said, "Mary, at the fort are 3 hungry little orphan girls. Take them something as soon as you can. 1 child is fair, 2 are dark. You will know them by the way they speak to you." Grandpa had now hastened home to hold me on his lap, and to hear me say that I was glad to be at his house, and intended to help Grandma all I could for being so good as to bring me there. After I told how we had cooked the liver, and how good it tasted, he wiped his eyes and said, "Mein child, when you little ones thanked me for that liver, it made me not so much your friend as when you called me Grandpa." As time went on, Grandma declared that I helped her a great deal because I kept her chip box full, shooed the hens out of the house, and drove the little chicks to bed nights. I don't recollect that I was ever tired or sleepy, yet I know that the night must have sped between the time of my last nod at the funny shadow picture of a rabbit which Jakey made hop across the wall behind the lighted candle, and Courage's barking near my pillow, which Grandma said meant, "Good morning, little girl." It was after one of these reminders of a new day that I saw Leanna. I don't know when or how she came, but I missed Frances and Georgia the more because I wanted them to share our comforts. Nevertheless, a strange feeling of uneasiness crept over me as I noticed, later, that Grandpa lingered, and that the 3 spoke long in their own tongue and glanced often toward me. Finally, Grandpa and Jakey went off in the wagon, and Grandma also disappeared, but soon returned, dressed for a trip to the fort, and explained that she had heard that Georgia was sick, and she would take me back and bring her in my place. I had known from the beginning that I was to stay only a little while, yet I was woefully disturbed at having my enjoyment so abruptly terminated. My first impulse was to cry, but somehow the influence of her who under the soughing pines of the Sierras had told me that friends do not come quickly to a cry-baby child gave me courage, and I looked up into the dear old face before me, and with the earnestness of an anxious child asked, "Grandma, why can't you keep 2 of us?" She looked at me, hesitated, then replied, "I will see." She kissed away my fears and rode off on old Lisa. I did not know that she would ride farther than the fort, and imagined that she had gone on horseback so that she might the easier bring back my little sister. Leanna washed the dishes and did the other work before she joined me in watching for Grandma's return. At last she came in sight, and I ran up the road, craning my neck to see if Georgia were really behind on old Lisa's back. And when I saw her pinched face aglow with smiles that were all for me, I had but one wish, and that was to get my arms around her. One chair was large enough to hold us both when we got into the house, and the big clock on the wall, with long weights reaching almost to the floor, and red roses painted around its white face, did not tick long before we were deaf to its sound, telling each other about the doings of the day. She knew more than I, who listened intently as she excitedly went on. "Me and Frances started to find you this morning, but we wasn't far when we met Jacob in the wagon, and he stopped and asked us where we was going. We told him. Then he told us to get in by him. But he didn't come this way, just drove down to the river, and some men lifted us out and set us in a boat and commenced to paddle across the water. I knew that wasn't the way, and I cried and cried as loud as I could cry, and told them I wanted to go to my little sister Eliza, and that I'd tip the boat over if they did not take me back. and one man said, "It's too bad.